Oh, hi, I didn't see you there. My name is Bliss Foster. Let's do a deep dive into Schiaparelli Haute Couture Spring Summer 2022 by Daniel Roseberry. This show is titled An Age of Discipline. This presentation is an ode to the disappointment that we've all felt thinking that we're out of this global catastrophe a year ago, only to get pushed back in by variants. There was kind of this worldwide disappointment as we all returned back to pause mode. The last couture collection from Schiaparelli was similar to most of the couture and ready-to-wear runway shows coming through at the time. A lot of hope and anticipation for the big return festival. So in response to that disappointment, Roseberry kind of parsed everything back. The typical surrealism that defines Schiaparelli was brought back a great deal, and the volumes and colors that define haute couture generally were also minimized. The colors specifically were restrained to black, white, and gold. Hey everybody, I have a Patreon and it is the only way that this channel is able to that was really close. It's the only way this channel is able to exist. So if you want episodes early, if you want exclusive episodes, and if you want to join the private Discord server, you gotta go join that Patreon. It's $3 a month. It's really not all that expensive. I suck at kendama. Please go join my Patreon so this channel can continue to run. I love you. So the number one thing that we do have to emphasize is that Roseberry Schiaparelli doesn't really need commentary in order to enjoy it. I mean, if you follow them on Instagram, if you've watched any of their runway shows on YouTube, or if you've just seen their stuff on celebrities, it is such a visual playground. The runway looks themselves are mesmerizing, and the close-up videos especially are just so juicy. I don't really know. I'm not sure. They're super good. And I do want to take a moment to hone in on the details of these close-up videos because I only just recently figured out something about these. The aesthetic of Schiaparelli is very visible from 30,000 feet, but that aesthetic remains very consistent all the way down. For most brands, the runway show, when taken in as a whole, bears the clear mark of the designer who made it. But if you zoom really close into an individual piece, that's just the shoulder of a blazer, right? There's not much of Vaccarello that you can see in the shoulder of that blazer. I'm sure it's a fine blazer, but there's a certain point of closeness that you get to it when it just no longer is clear who it's by. It's the context of everything else in the runway that makes it distinct and special. But you could identify a Roseberry Schiaparelli piece if it was an inch from your face in a dark room. Everything is dictated by this just purposeful, excessive opulence. All gold everything, precious jewels, just doing the most at all times. But what makes this really cool to me is the DIY feeling in the details themselves. Almost like a child's hand was guiding the final execution here. And that's obviously not to say that this is amateurish. Look at it. But there's almost like this beautiful haphazard element to it, like it used to be a normal object, but someone dropped it into a dragon's den or something. The kind of focal point that can get us started on this show is that it's supposed to be that Scap is dressing a goddess for this runway. No one can express this better than Daniel Roseberry himself, so I'm just going to read the show notes and we'll follow along visually. After 2 years of thinking about the surreal, I found myself instead thinking about the imperial. The heavens as a place to escape from the chaos of our planet, but also the home of a mythical high priestess, at once goddess and alien, who might in fact walk among us. I imagined a being whose very clothes defied rules of gravity. She would wear razor-sharp tailoring with nipped waists and oversized dove collars ready to take flight. She would wear a short cream duckbill-backed jacket of Taylor's U.S. cotton toile, embroidered with vintage Schiaparelli palm trees that actually lifted themselves from her shoulders and stood upright at attention. She would wear neat shorts trimmed in ecru silk file, beige satin waist cinchers, aerodynamic bustiers with cream satin sashes, and fountains of black crin that trembled and bounced in movement. She would wear a long tailcoat in satin back file, embroidered with a vintage Schiaparelli motif, the Apollo Fountain of Versailles. And finally, after the rigor of tailoring and exhausting a new, sharper silhouette, she would embrace her inner folly, giving way to fountains of gold, black plumage, creepy crawlies in cabochons, and a crystal cocktail dress like the inside of a jewelry box.
Cabochon.
All right. So this is meant to be really parsed down, and it is. I mean, especially if you look back at the recent offerings from Schiaparelli Haute Couture, there are fewer colors and the tailoring is a lot less wild compared to last season. We've arrived at a much sharper shape now, but it does have to be said that toned down for Daniel Roseberry is still a lot. A marvelous, marvelous lot. Let's talk about references. We have a lot to cover with the references, so we're gonna have to move fairly quickly here. First of all, it's really easy to assume with heritage houses that everything began with the namesake, Elsa Schiaparelli, and then it's just sort of like popped back into existence here with the new creative director, Daniel Roseberry. With one of the best references in this show, we get a reminder that this house does have a very full, long history to it. We see this through an update of the eyewear. In look 12, we see these crystal tears / running makeup here. This is a continuation of the jeweled eyes theme that Roseberry has made one of his signatures at Schiaparelli. We can see that here, and here, and here. And also here, and here. Daniel really likes this motif a lot. And that motif is a continuation of a embroidery that was done by the previous creative director, Bertrand Guyon. But we see that go even farther back to the namesake, Elsa Schiaparelli. I'm kind of bummed that we have to bump over the era of Christian Lacroix at the house, but he didn't do the eye motif. So dating back to Elsa Schiaparelli when she was actually running the house, Elsa Schiaparelli was legendary for costume jewelry, and this is one of the designs that she made. It's absolutely beautiful. If you've seen my extremely detailed history of modern Schiaparelli video, you know that Salvador Dali and Elsa Schiaparelli were close collaborators. So Elsa's piece inspired your favorite Woe Bro to make an imitation piece that was fine jewelry. The difference primarily is that Elsa's is made of glass enamel and metal, whereas Dali's piece is all precious stones. So in this case, it's usually the other way around, but here it is a costume jewelry piece that is being ripped off by a fine jewelry piece. Mamma mia, I love Schiaparelli so much. I love Schiaparelli so much. It's not a joke. I really do love them so much. So Daniel Roseberry is continuing this legacy by taking the Weeping Eye one step further with this piece. It's really cool to see new chapters added to the story of a piece that has so much history, yet in the context of everything else that happens in Schiaparelli, this is kind of a blink and you miss it sort of thing. You get it? Blink and you miss it? Also, I have this really embarrassing story about this. I went to the Dali Museum in Spain one time, and there was an opportunity for me to get to go back and look at the jewelry collection, but I was like, I'm not paying extra to go look at some jewelry. Jewelry collections in museums are often really boring, and I don't want to go look at that, and I definitely don't want to pay extra for it because it was a lot of extra money. And now I realize that I could have seen this piece in person, and I missed the opportunity to. I am so mad. Okay. Another interesting process note is that Daniel Roseberry went on record recently saying that he has switched to only sketching using Sharpies now. I think he's used those a lot in the past, but starting after the collection that we're looking at right now, it's been all Sharpies for all the sketches. So it'll be really interesting to see how that affects the final product during the next Haute Couture show. Roseberry also told Vogue that he took a lot of inspiration from sci-fi epic movies like Dune, Prometheus, Interstellar, and Arrival. We could maybe draw some one-to-one comparisons between, say, look 16 and the nun's habits from the Bene Gesserit costume in Dune, or maybe the fact that the alien hands in Arrival sort of look like they were the inspiration for these accessories here. But mostly, these films are fitting inspiration because sci-fi, more than any other genre, is often trying to capture sublime gargantuanness. Even if these movies aren't spiritual in nature, these movies do try to activate that part of our brains, right? They make us look at these creatures and these awe-inspiring scenes, and you kind of get that I'm in the presence of a god feeling. We have a couple other references that we need to knock out, like the fact that the cone bra looks are definitely a reference to Jean-Paul Gaultier. We also have this tunic-like piece that is heavily based off of a Schiaparelli custom design for Lady Mendel, who was a socialite in the 30s. Okay, so done with references, let's put those away for a little bit. We remember that we are talking about a goddess here. A goddess is the one, this alien goddess, is the subject of the entire runway show. These are not different goddesses, this is all one goddess that has different embodiments. So if the subject here is a goddess, then these shapes, these wild, beautiful, crazy shapes, they make a lot of sense, right? And Couture does mostly deal with wild shapes that feel beautiful and impractical, but it's really cool to see a vision and a baseline for a collection that makes those shapes it contextualizes them in a way that makes sense. The age-old question for high fashion is, if you're wearing this dress, can you sit in a chair and eat soup? And the answer for the vast majority of these, and honestly the vast majority of haute couture, is no, you can't do that. But here we see Roseberry designing for a goddess who doesn't need soup. She doesn't need to sit in chairs. She doesn't ride public transit, and she really only walks when she wants to be seen as more relatable to the people that she's gracing with her presence. And that goddess character, according to the story of the show notes, she's experienced a similar situation to what we've all been through with this global catastrophe the past few years. In the show notes, Daniel talks about the goddess experiencing a difficult time of discipline, hardship, and rigor. And we see that phase of her existence in the strict tailoring. There's almost like a funeral feel to these clothes. She's moved out of the age of discipline, and she rewards herself with a tempered opulence. Because like at the end of World War II, there was a specific day where all of the newspapers told everyone it is officially over, and everyone literally took out to the streets and celebrated together. And I think we've all been looking for something similar for this slow burn 2-year nightmare. A specific day where everyone understands all at once it's over, and then the festival starts or something. But we never really got that. And so all of us have just continued pushing forward with our lives. The goddess at the core of this collection ends up being a fitting allegory for what we're all doing now. We're celebrating because this is done, or it's at least nearly done. But it's not the uncontrolled bacchanalian celebration that we thought it would be a year ago. It's a celebration with a temperance to it. Fashion isn't really a reflection of culture. Fashion is culture. And I mean, if we pull it out of this show a little bit, I really hope that the attitude that we've all adopted now, this sort of tempered opulence, I really hope that that means that we're all at least growing together in some way. Join that Patreon. You have no idea how many times it took me to do that. Seriously, this channel can't exist unless people support it in a literal way. Link is in the description. Go join up. It costs $3 and you're supporting the channel. Thank you so much for joining me. Go follow me on Instagram and Twitter. I love you all a ton. Just a ton. Goodbye. Are you listening to me, Andrew? Peace.